Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Janine Chavez, and I am your Activities Director at Cibola High School. It is the request of Cibola High School administration that we honor and recognize each graduate. Most of you are here today to celebrate the accomplishments of one graduate special to you. Kindly be reminded to refrain from the use of noisemakers so that each graduate's name may be heard and honored by family and friends. Thank you for attending today's commencement and for sharing in Cibola High School's commemoration of the academic achievement of the graduating class of 2023. At this time, please stand for the Cibola High School class of 2023. Good evening. The administration, staff, and students of Cibola High School would like to welcome you to our 2023 commencement exercises. Would you please stand for the presentation of colors and remain standing until the colors have been retired? Gentlemen, hats off, please. Tonight's color guard is being presented by Cibola High School's Marine Corps JROTC. The color guard and honor guard are under the direction of Master Sergeant Pedro Chamorro. The color guard is being commanded by Cadet Captain Aiden Scruggs. The Marine Corps flag is being carried by Cadet Sergeant Victor Cruz. Cadet Gunnery Sergeant Caden Moyer and Cadet Staff Sergeant Christian Acevedo are this evening's rifle bearers. Our national anthem will be sung by Cibola's concert choir.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the
Gentlemen, hats on, please. Graduates and audience, please be seated. Thank you. And now, Cibola Concert Choir, under the direction of Mr. Evan Aguilar, will perform the call.
It started out as a feeling, which then turned into a hope, which then turned into a quiet thought, which then turned into a quiet word. And then that word grew louder, louder, till it was a battle cry. Now come back when you call me. No need to
It is my pleasure to introduce our honored guest this afternoon. From the Albuquerque Public Schools Board of Education, Board Vice President Peggy Mueller-Aragon. From the Albuquerque Public Schools Leadership Team, Superintendent Scott Elder and Associate Superintendent for Zone 3, Amanda DeBell. Cibola High School's Administration, Pamela Meyer, Principal. Assistant Principals Angela Reitman, Chelsea Hay, and Michael Zufall. Let's give it up for the Class of 2023 sponsor, Mr. Carl Schaller. Our Senior Class Secretary, Savannah McSween. Senior Class Vice President, Emma Stagen. Senior Class President, Lillian Anderson. Student Body Historian, Sama Pashtun. And Paige Zapak. Student Body Secretary and Salutatorian, Ava Carpentier. Student Body Vice President, Hayden Brownell. Student Body President, Dylan Cordray. And the valedictorians for the Class of 2023, Trinity Short and Rebecca Thomas. And now for our first speech, I'd like to recognize our Student Body President, Dylan Cordray.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would first like to welcome all faculty, alumni, friends, family, and visitors for being here with us today for Cibola's graduating class of 2023. Today is a very special day for this class, as today is the day that all our hard work over the past 4 years pays off. As student body president, I've had the opportunity of visiting other various high schools, and after doing so, I can truthfully say that Cibola has the best group of students. The students attending Cibola are the friendliest and most accepting people I know, and coming into high school 4 years ago, I personally wasn't worried because of the environment I knew Cibola had to offer. Well, class of 2023, we did it. After all the assignments, tests, and ingenuity, we made it. Whether we actually studied or just relied on Quizlet and Brainly to make it through high school, here we are. Our journey that began in 2010 has finally come to an end. Now, what we do next is up to us. While today would be easy for us to think of today as a day for closing doors, really, today is a day about opening them. Yes, today we may have to say goodbye to lots of our best friends, but today is also the day we embark on the next chapter of our lives. As we leave high school in the past, I hope we live our lives forward, striving for one thing: success. Oxford Languages defines success as the attainment of fame, wealth, or social status. However, I prefer the definition from Merriam-Webster, which says, success is attaining a desired object or end. We define our own success. We control our lives. I would like to share the life story of someone who I've always found inspiring and successful. While he found success in his $130 billion company, he also found success in the form of living his life doing what he loved most, making people smile. This person started out with nothing more than a suitcase and a train ticket to California. He began his career making short cartoons, and while he wasn't making much money, he still found happiness doing this. He struggled to get things started, but after many risks and several legal battles with his work, his company began to grow. As an entertainer, he went from making short cartoons to full-length animated movies, and eventually he even got into the business of theme parks. He risked all of his savings into making one of the first theme parks ever created, and it was an immediate hit. And the rest is history. This man was Walt Disney, and I encourage all of us to live by one of his sayings: all your dreams can come true if you have the courage to pursue them. While replicating Walt Disney's success may not be easy, who's to stop us from trying? Thank you, class of 2023, and good luck.
Next up, the salutatorian for the class of 2023, Ava Carpentier.
Good evening, students, staff, family, and friends.
Thank you everyone for being here today to celebrate the class of 2023. After learning that I was awarded Salutatorian, I began to think about what I wanted to say to you all this evening. And if I'm being honest, I couldn't come up with anything truly inspiring. But I can tell you this, I love Cibola High School. There are so many things I'm going to miss, maybe not running late to class every morning and literally running to class barefoot because I didn't have time to put on my shoes. I certainly brought a whole new meaning to having the dogs out. I will definitely miss every sporting event and spirit assembly, cheering with all of my friends to the point of not having a voice the next day. One of my favorite memories was being on the receiving end of all of your cheering when my sister and I were a part of the girls' soccer team that did something that no other girls' soccer team in the state had accomplished, winning the Metro Championship, District Championship, and State Championship in one season. Apart from being in multiple sports, I love school so much that I took it upon myself to join multiple clubs. The one club that resonates with me to this day is the Best Buddies program. The positivity and happiness that each member radiated was contagious. It was guaranteed that I would be leaving each meeting with a smile. Going into this final year, I was voted in as one of your student body officers. This incredible team was led by Ms. Chavez, the activities director, who in my opinion is the backbone of Cibola High School. She helped us orchestrate senior sunrise to senior sunset and everything in between, including our synchronized swimming homecoming reveal, which ended in a dislocated shoulder and confusion amongst the crowd. If you know, you know. Looking up now, seeing all of your faces, I can confidently say that each and every one of you has contributed to these memories that will last a lifetime. As I think about what's next and the adventures that lie ahead, I am scared, nervous, and excited. All I can do is tell myself that tomorrow is never promised, but a chance to live your truth. I'm going to end this the way Mr. Steve, the best custodian ever, and I would end our Fridays. I would tell him, "Hey, it's Friday." And his reply is what I echo to the class of 2023. Hell yeah, we made it. Thank you.
It is my pleasure to introduce the first valedictorian of the class of 2023, Ms. Trinity Short.
Wow, you'd think after all the presentations I've had to give the past 4 years I wouldn't be this nervous right now, but that is not the case. It is an immense honor and privilege to speak to you all tonight. Fellow graduates, seeing your beaming faces, your emotional moms, and your proud dads is all due to our outstanding achievements. As this is our final time being in the same space, I hope you enjoy every moment of this night and reminisce about high school with a smile. Since I know you've all heard enough platitudes by this point, I'll tend to limit them in the ensuing minutes. Growing up, perseverance and accountability were heavily instilled in me through sports. I like to think those qualities make up who I am today. Just as sports impact my life, all of you have lessons to take from the things you've experienced. How you learn and grow from those lessons paves the path called life. In life, we have choices, and we decide where to plant our seeds. Plants can grow in healthy soil, sometimes rocky soil, but never hard ground. Choose healthy soil. Even better, don't be a product of your environment. Create your environment. Enrich the soil. Create happiness, build connections, inspire others, never settle. Learn to look at setbacks as opportunities to grow. High school has taught me to live one day at a time. Time is a thief, and stress is the killer of joy. I guarantee one day we will all look back at the simpler times, when the biggest worry was a high school football game, a math quiz, or getting ready for homecoming. As we enter adulthood, I urge all of you to enjoy the small things. Choose healthy soil and improve it. To the amazing staff Cibola High School proudly boasts, thank you. Mr. Zufall, I made it here today. Thank you for applauding me in the halls for the occasional school appearances I made. On a serious note, thank you for always supporting our sports and activities. We notice. Thank you, Mrs. Peterson, for reminding me to focus on my future. Thank you, Mr. Rogges, for being a smile in the halls and making first period worth showing up to. Thank you, Mr. Gessel, for always asking me about my track meets. Thank you, Mr. Wyhe, for just being awesome, even though you almost laughed at me when I cried during a test. And thank you, Coach Kinney, for being a mother figure to me in school and on the track. To my beautiful family here tonight, thank you. Jordan, you're the best shoulder to cry on, and I am lucky to call you my sister. To my dad, thank you for showing me what hard work and patience looks like in the most loving way, and for cheering me on at the finish line of every race I ever ran. Finally, I want to thank my mom for setting an example for me and being the best listening ear that I could ever ask for. I realize some of you may have tuned out at this point, but if there's anything you can take from this speech, believe that you can shape your life and enhance others. So, class of 2023, how will you enrich the soil so you bloom and thrive and reach your potential? Thank you.
And now our second valedictorian, Ms. Rebecca Thomas.
Douglas Mallock wrote, "The tree that never had to bite for sun and sky and air and light, but stood out in the open plain and always got its share of rain. Never became a forest king, but lived and died a scrubby thing. Good timber does not grow with ease, the stronger wind, the stronger trees." As with trees, struggle is an important part of our growth. Becoming a forest king doesn't mean that you are going to be the best at whatever you are doing, because there is always going to be someone better than you, faster than you, stronger than you, smarter than you, or richer than you. But using your experience to strive to be better allows growth to happen. There are many of you who know struggle and hardship more than I do, and probably better than I ever will in some aspects. Universally, though, we can all agree that there are going to be points in each of our lives that will be difficult and hard, and each of us will struggle. While these experiences aren't fun, they form who we are and can lead us to becoming better people if we allow them to. Oftentimes, when you don't struggle for something, you aren't as grateful for and appreciative of what you have. Being grateful and appreciative will help you find more happiness and peace in your life. Many times, you are not going to know what is going on in somebody else's life, but everybody has their own struggles every day, so just be kind. Kindness is something we have all been taught. Remember the kindergarten adage, sharing is caring. Generosity goes a long way, and typically it's the small things that make the biggest difference. It can be smiling at someone you pass in the hallway, opening the door for someone else, or helping someone that might need it. Your kindness won't always be received well. Sometimes your day will go horribly and you won't want to be kind, but I know that as you try to lift others up around you, your day gets better. Making the world a better place starts with making your community a better place, so go out and do it. Congratulations, class of 2023, and good luck with your future endeavors. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to present Cibola's principal, Pamela Meyer.
Good evening to our Cougar families, Cibola High School esteemed staff, and community participants. Here we are, guys, the day you've all been waiting for. You've arrived hovering in anticipation and maybe quavering with some degree of uncertainty. If you don't have it all figured out yet, you're in good company. And if you think you know what your next steps will be, you have a set plan, you're on a certain course, you can also predict that change is inevitable. And what a good thing change can be. If we get too fixed in our plans, we don't leave any room for spontaneity, improvisation, and fortuity. If life's plans are too stationary, uniform, concrete, a course with guardrails and lines we don't breach, we become boxed in with a narrow focus, and this inertia can lead to the mundane. We know that focus is a positive trait, but it comes with limitations too. We live in a fast-changing world, and we've learned to navigate plenty of it. This successful and stressful navigation builds resilience and fortitude. In fact, you've navigated nearly 52 different teachers since kindergarten. You've adapted to different classrooms, classmates, and course norms, expectations, rules, and personalities. You've learned how to pivot and how to become your true self, to shine as an individual, making your own way, setting your own trends, exerting your own opinions, and creating your own stamp of authenticity. You've broken the mold, or at least you've shaped it with the promise of you. And that's the beauty of opportunity, of the great unknown. I encourage you to take in the expansive view of the world, to be observant and open, undeterred, to unlock mysteries. I encourage you to really see the forest, not just the trees. I urge you to live, or try to live, a less prescriptive life. Dare I say, step away from your comfort zone. Like I once read in a fortune cookie, do not mistake your next opportunity for a distraction. And we know choosing a less defined path can bring the unexpected, introduce a new angle, a new perspective, push against the status quo, and challenge the best laid plans for the better. Show the world who you are, make a mark, stand strong, even in the face of adversity, even going against the grain. And be your own best advocate and advocate for others who need you to stand up for them. You inspire us every day, and I appreciate how you've delivered your personal best and how you've already struck a chord never heard before. You have prevailed despite numerous challenges, and you've done it with grit and determination. Even if you don't feel ready, trust me, you are. Class of 2023, you got this. And now, Albuquerque Public Schools Superintendent Scott Elder, Associate Superintendent Amanda DeBell, and APS Board Member Peggy Muller-Aragon, the graduates before you have met the graduation requirements set forth by the Albuquerque Public Schools Board of Education along with the New Mexico Public Education Department. To you, I present the class of 2023.
So on behalf of the Albuquerque Public Schools Board of Education, I, Peggy Muller-Aragon, accept the 2023 graduating class of Cibola High School. Yay! I know that all the Cougars are in the house today, and I always know because you stand your ground and you land on your feet. Through hard work and perseverance, I hope you continue living your life as a Cougar with power, strength, intention, and grace. Congratulations to all of you today.
And now I would like to recognize Craig Garcia and Jose Arias, Spanish teachers, and Jeff Jones, social studies teacher, to announce the names of our graduates.
Ali Abdul. Nomar Alvaro. Dylan Allen. Yahaira Altamirano. Julián Alvarado Piceno. Amberly Amin. Elaine Anderson. Jasmine Apodaca. Damien Aragon. Sienna Aragon. Vanessa Archiveque. Amber Archuleta. Alexa A. Argueta. Ezekiel Armas. Maya N. Armendaris. Samara Armenta. Caitlin Bab. Anthony J. Baca Sandoval. Melissa Baidon. Jayton Baldwin. Alexis Ballard. Anthony Bernard. Ariana Bathurst. Am I going? Where? Okay. Gianna Nicole Baraglia. Alexandra Baxter. Zarek J. Becker. Angel May Sofia Castillo Bedina. Sean Bedina. Lauren Z. Begay. Mason J. Belen. Lorna Bell. Gilberto Beltrán Mendoza. Alexis Benavides. Daniel Benham. Where? Alexa A. Argueta. Beyonce Basutro. Are we caught up? This is Matthias Benkert. Isaac Bess. Roman Bueller. Anna Bonancini. Jared Bradley. Midian Bricky. Reese Brock. Jason Bington.
Nahid Camacho Cano. Cameron Campbell. Luz Carvajal. Angelica Carrillo. Nicole Karsten. Augustine Caulfield. Desiree Cervantes. Dominic Cervantes. Sage Chacon Rodriguez. Macy Chase. Aiden Chavez. David Chavez. Lourdes Esperanza Chavez. Madison Chavez. Renee Chavez. Angelica Chi. Tiffany Chen. Jace Chilcote. Megan Christofferson. Justin Tianchetti. Emma Cohey. Alia Cordova. Samantha Cordova. Evan Cordray. Mireya Cruz. Kenneth Cuff. Jeremiah Dakpano. Monica Dale. Rafael Denga. Veronica Davenport. Jeremiah Davis. Justin Deaton. Nisa Delgado. Aiden DePoy. Aiden DePriest. John Detluff. Alex Duvall. Maya Diaz. Tyler Dorsey. Adrian Duran. Sorina Nieves Isabella Duran. Anaí Escarcega Marquez. Luke Eschenbrenner. Alfonso Escobar Yela. Luis Germán Espinosa Muñoz. Alexandra Farrow. Ventura Fernandez. Natasia D. Alice Figueroa. Sofia Finale. Nevea Flores. Elizabeth Francis. Cisco Franco. Haley Francois. Jessica Alia Frenes. Samantha Fuentes.
Jayla Gallegos. Avery Garcia. Eliza Garcia. Haley Garcia. Jaden Garcia. Jenna Yvonne Garcia. Nathan Garcia. Santino Garcia. Kaylee Garduño. Trey Geddes. Joshua George. Thomas Gersbeck. Adrian Alexander Goins. Amy Gomez. Trinity Gonzalez. Fabian Gonzalez. Ryan Grange. Megan Greenhall. Gilbert Griego. Jessica Aaliyah Frenes. Brandon Anthony Griffin. Daniel Grizikowski. Phil Guerrero. Hannah Gunn. Evangeline Michelle Gurule. Tori Gutierrez. Stephanie Gutierrez. Megan Hargrove. Xander Harrigan. Peyton Harrison. Rachel Esther Harrison. Caitlin Hawkins. Krista Rose Healy. Joshua Henderson. Nathaniel Herbert. Gabriela Carolina Hernandez. Wyatt Keith Hickman. Evan Hildebrand. Mitchell Holland. Maya Hollander. Eliana Holly. Dante Hollins. Amara Howard. Brianna Hubner. Aaliyah Huerta. Kaylee Hunter. Andrew Hutchinson.
Ariana Ibarra. Alyssa Jackson. Kendall Jaramillo. Jaden R. Jennings. Brisha T. Johnson. Delana C. Johnson. Jaden J. Johnson. Ruben R. Johnson. Aiden Jones Joyce. Armando Juarez. Ashley Juarez. Ryan Judkins. Lance Juno. Damon Christopher Kearns. Troy King. Ollie Klein. Gabriel S. Nosesgun. Lee Cole. Joshua Kershi. Anya Deja Lacey. Isaiah Lawrence. Brianna Lee. Claire Lynn Legate. Brooke Lehman. Mary Leslie. James H. Lewis. Samantha Isabel Licerio. Jacob L. Littleman. Jocelyn Rose Lopez. Anna Love. Kyle Ryan Lavelle. Evan Elias Lovett. Caden Lowe. Leandra Darlene Loya. Juan Lozano III. Araceli Lozoya. Jerry Liu. Yuhao Liu. Haley Amber Lucero. Justin Ben Lucero. Emmanuel Lujan. Mia J. Luna.
Morgan Kiara Madalena. Anthony Maestas. Jonah Maestas. Mia Maestas. Alyssa M. Maldonado. Riley Mangus. Alyssa Martinez. Diego Martinez. Evan Martinez. Haley Martinez. Joseph Martinez. Nicholas Martinez. Sarah Massey. Jude Rivers Matthew. Ricardo Juriel Max. Max Mayfield. Laurel McCrary. Aiden Mills. Israel Miramontes. Connor Moore. Coda Monarch. Brandon Montano. Stephen Montano. Jalen Montes. Angelica Martinez Carranza. Michaela Montoya. Caleb Moore. Caitlin Moore. Antonio Mora. Zachariah Morgan. Cadence Mosier. Braden Mummert. Kara Ann Mundus. Richard Newbert III. Lily Nguyen. David Matthew Nota. Elena Olivares. Christina Olivares. Cassidy Orlando. Jesse Orr. Alyssa Ortiz. Gabriel Ortiz. Judah Ortiz. Jade Otero. Joshua Otero. Judy Oyanatumba. Alexa Ozeta.
Sofia Pacheco. Zachary Padilla. Isaiah Padilla Sanchez. Eliberto Palafox. Jacqueline Palmer. Nevaeh Parker. Preston Parker. Caitlin Peach. Damian Pedroncelli. Molly Peak. Dominic Peña. Michael Pires. Marshall Philpott. Keena Pipkin. Wilson Poyer. Jaime Ponce. Luis Portillo. Kevin Puebla. Dominic Quintana. Elena Ramirez. Elias Ramirez. Monique Angelica Raimundo. Malachi Redhouse. Nolan Reed. Miguel Regino. Natalie Real. Delilah Reinchuck. Jordan Rex. Lily Rich. Catherine Reisinger. Martinez. Brooke Lynn Ritter. Julian Rivera. Aiden Roberts. Dylan Robinson. Roman Rodriguez. Anthony Romero. Joseph Romero. Nathan Romero. Madison Romero Gomez. Caleb Rominger. Trey Ronzone. Melina Rosales. Justin Rose. Jasmine Rosna. Heaven Lee Roybal.
Natalia Sujovic. Jacob E. Saiz. Abraham Salas. Nathan Salazar. Jacob Manuel Salgado. Tyler Saline. Cassidy Sanchez. Jason A. Sanchez. Joyce S. Sanchez. Mariana R. Sanchez. Nadia M. Sanchez. Leilani G. Sanchez Gaitan. Armando Santiago. Caridad Sauri. Quentin Schlarb. Alexia Cedillo. Isaac Lucero Segura. Araceli Cias. Isaiah Cifuentes. Kyla D. Simmons. Jariah D. Sims. Imani Smith. Rogan Solomon. Leilani Soriano. Evan Soto. Solomon Spalding. Jordan Stanley. L. Staszewski. Brandon Cash Stone. Michael Stone. Madeline Strife. Grace Struthers. Delaney P. Sudlow Mintier. Gabriela Surojawan. Haley Swanberg. Hillary J. Tafoya. Ray Talbert. Victoria Talbert. Jakai M. Taylor Mahan. Tiffany N. Teach. Melanie H. Torres. Robert D. Torres. Helena Tran. Ashlyn J. Trujillo. Asaya A. Trujillo. Donovan J. Trujillo. Elijah L. Trujillo. Isaiah J. Trujillo. Jake E. Turano. Cruz Norland Tuttle.
Alicia Urioste. Mia Grace Urioste. Garrison Van Slyke. Ivone Sofia Vigil. James Velasquez. Catherine Velasquez. Serenity Verhoff. Vincent Vigil. Brooke Volza. Isabella Voth. Ian Ward. Josiah Ward. Ashley Warden. Aiden Warmerdam. Kaylee Weaver. Morgan Wheeler. Annabelle Wilhite. Ron C. Wilson. Serenity Wilson. Natalie Wiltsey. Mason Winner. Keisha Yamatewa. Sarah Zubia. And now, your honored graduates. Trinity Short. Rebecca Thomas. Sama Pashtun. Paige Zapak. Savannah McSween. Ava Carpentier. Emma Stagen. Hayden Brownell. Lillian Anderson. And Dylan Cordray.
Ladies and gentlemen, our senior class president, Lillian Anderson.
Good evening, friends, family, teachers, faculty, and most importantly, the class of 2023. I am so honored to be able to speak to you all tonight. Thank you for being here. To my fellow graduates, all we have ever wanted to do was grow up. Throughout the years, we have all shared endless laughs and jokes within the walls of our classrooms. As children, we always learned to be older, taller, smarter, and stronger, anxious to be big enough to ride the roller coaster and old enough to sit in the front seat of the car. We grew up reading picture books, and we eventually moved on to chapter books. Now, we are all prepared to close one chapter of our lives and turn the page to a new one. We grew up learning and earning wisdom from our teachers, who have inspired us to put our best foot forward every day. We grew up with the world at our fingertips, watching it shift and take shape before our eyes. Now, nothing can stop us as we grasp that vision and make life what we want it to be. We were just kids, dreaming about our next adventure, eager to explore the unknown. And here I stand before you today as we all take those first steps towards our new adventures. We have overcome countless unforeseen difficulties along the way, and now, after approximately 13 years, 2,340 days, and 56,170 hours, we are down to our last minute. We grew up making cherished memories that will last a lifetime, even as we continue to make new ones. Even though we grew up full of dreams and disappointment, difficulties and successes, tears and laughter, we know that we still have growing to do and that we are grateful for every single moment that brought us here. Congratulations, class of 2023. In honor of growing up, please join me in moving your tassels from the right to the left. Thank you.
All right, thank you for attending our ceremony. Please allow all seniors to leave the floor and leave the Coliseum. You'll be able to meet and greet our graduates at the Creative Arts parking lot just to the southwest of the doors you used to enter. To the graduates, I wish you the best in all you do. Stay rad 2023. Graduates, please stand. And now, ladies and gentlemen, one more giant round of applause for the class of 2023.